Can I ask you all to be upstanding in Startup Grind tradition and give Austin Ryan a big Startup Grind Limerick welcome. Austin, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Matt. Delighted to be here.
I had a chat with you a few weeks ago and a couple of things stuck out in my mind. One was hurling. Without hurling, you might never have started AMCS.
Absolutely, and maybe without it, we could be a lot further, I don't know. So, I suppose the story of AMCS started after hurling training one evening. I was a software engineer by trade, and I worked with Ericsson's in Athlone for about 4 years. And in 2003, I took a voluntary severance package with them. And at the time, I was looking at opportunities abroad, because really at that stage, the telecom industry was on the floor. There was very little opportunities. And I suppose for me, from a personal side, I felt that I was highly skilled in a sector where there was very few opportunities at the time, and it gave me a severe wake-up call. So at the time, there was a friend of mine, a playing colleague, Jimmy Martin. Jimmy was a tip man who had moved into my own parish, which was Ballybreakin, and Jimmy came to me with a concept. He was working in analog at the time as a fabrication engineer, and Jimmy, without boring people too much on the technology, came to me with this idea that there was radio frequency identification technology, which is microchipping, which really is the next generation of barcodes, and he felt that there was lots of different applications of where this technology could be brought from.
So that's RDIF.
RFID.
RFID, yes.
Yeah. So again, both of us were hurlers, and both of us were from farming, agricultural backgrounds. And if you think back to 2003, it was just after the foot and mouth outbreak. One area is where we said that one area where there definitely has to be an opening for this is in the agricultural sector for tracking cattle and that. Because people can think back to 2001. We had only one outbreak in the Republic, which was up in the Cooley Mountains. And lo and behold, when the cattle cull was done, there was 6,000 less animals up there than the guys were claiming headage for. So there was a problem. We felt that we had a solution that could fix it. And I suppose, to cut a long story short, it never really got out of the blocks with the Department of Agriculture. I think a lot of people at the time were maybe afraid of technology, but we could see that there wasn't really a hope for it at that stage. And again, also at the same time, we saw opportunities, and we had talked to people like Heineken, where at the time they definitely had a big problem, whereby in Ireland, and full of useless stats tonight, we have a keg population of 2 million kegs, and about 7% of these go missing a year. And an empty keg at the time had a value of about €90. And again, to cut a long story short, Heineken and all the breweries, it was market share and things like that were the key things for them, not tightening up the supply chain. And I suppose, as a stroke of luck, we saw at the time that there was big opportunities in Ireland in the waste and recycling sector, that basically landfill in Ireland was becoming very, very expensive. They had started to do the first feasibility study on a pool bag incinerator, which will only be opened in 2017. And so at that time, there was big market forces that were driving the industry, that they would monitor and measure, and basically they would start to go to pay-by-weight legislation. So we looked at what was out there in the market, and from my time in Ericsson's, I had lived in Sweden, and I know that Sweden were a little bit ahead of the curve on that. And I went over to Sweden and I spoke with a few companies that were involved in the space. And I suppose we started working as a system integrator, and we took some solutions from these guys, brought them to Ireland. We were very fortunate at the time that we won a major customer here in the Midwest, Clean Ireland Recycling, and also that there was a tender out with Cork County Council, and that we won it. And it was absolutely unknown that someone from a local authority would take a leap of faith in a startup company. So we got a few exceptional breaks, and in our first full year of trading, we turned just over €850,000. So it was, it was a great start.
It was a great start, but just going back slightly, that sounds like it all happened really quick and easy. I'm sure it was a grind, because you said that the original applications were, even though there was a need, the product market fit just wasn't there for the animal application or the kegs, and you tried both. I'm sure as you went through them, you must have felt like, God, I was really excited about this. There is opportunities, and then was it like right back then to, what are we doing? Have we a crazy idea?
Yeah, I suppose there was a little bit of that. We didn't think that it was crazy, and that's not being arrogant about it, but you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And we just felt that, the people, those sectors, they didn't really want to implement change. And I suppose as a company, if I was to say, what do we do now? We go to large organizations, we implement ERP software, and a lot of what we do is change management. And if you have the best technology in the world, but people do not want to implement change, you're finished.
In a way, you were 10 years ahead of the curve in terms of the Internet of Things with those ideas.
A little bit. And since then, both of those industries have moved on. There's no doubt about it. But in terms of if we were dependent on them as a business and a livelihood in 2004, we were dead in the water.
So the third application then, which was in the waste management business, initially, am I right in saying it started with you actually physically putting the RFID chip into the bins to be able to monitor use?
That was just an enabler whereby you were able to tie a customer to a bin, and then we had technology on the back of the truck and software that would weigh the bin, and we would do everything to billing the customer, scheduling the customer, and all of that. So
to what extent did the government's change in terms towards waste management affect your success, the deregulation?
Well, I suppose the deregulation at the time, it definitely did drive it, because I suppose really that was one of the drivers, but the big driver at the time was landfill cost. The cost of getting waste was so expensive that every waste operator had to go out and to have the technology that could measure it, because every bin that they were emptying and that they weren't billing for was costing them money. At the time it was costing close on €200 a tonne to dispose of waste, and that was the big market dynamic and the big market driver. And I suppose for us at the time, and I suppose one thing that I would always harp on to startups is that you have to get out to and win customers earlier and be out with your customers to learn about the industry and the sector. I suppose what was a little bit unique for Jimmy and I was neither of us came from the waste industry, but people within the industry knew that it was lacking technology, and that we were guys that were a little bit tech savvy and that could bring that to the sector. But again, going back to the point of being with your customer and knowing with your customer, when we started out first, I would have said, this is a great technology. It's very fair on how the customer is billed, in that if your bin is, those who have the heavy bins pay more, and it's a very good, green, noble initiative. But the honesty was that our customers wanted this technology because they had serious problems with fraud in their operations, people picking bins that they shouldn't. They had a lot of customers that were, acting the maggot, really, to put things lightly. And then it's like anything, there was an 80-20 rule, that 20% of the customers that they were picking, that they were loss making, and they needed the technology to identify them so that they could change the behaviour or the billing patterns for these customers. And our technology, along with, as I said, the stuff like the landfill charge and the policy, had a big change in turning Ireland from being one of the worst recyclers in the late 90s to now being one of the best. And it's purely because a lot of it has to do with the technology that was deployed and the willingness of the private sector to drive all of this technology. And it was driven by one simple dynamic, that the less that the private operators put in the landfill, the more it dropped to their bottom line. And at the moment, I do find it very ironic in Ireland that there's such a hullabaloo about water charges, when we're probably the last country in Europe to implement water charges, but we're probably the first to implement waste charges, and how by charging for waste has introduced such conservation in the industry.
And it's kind of the reverse of that a bit in the UK, Austin, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Everybody's billed for their water and their waste charges. Their waste is part of their council tax system.
But they don't really know how much they're paying for that.
No, they're not, and it's all wrapped up in one bill that covers everything from libraries to waste collection and so forth.
Right. So when you originally put your product out there, did you feel it was like a finished product, ready to go?
No, absolutely not. As I said, we originally started off as a product where we were integrating, and the more we got in front of customers and the more we saw what our partners were doing, we felt that there was huge gaps. and that if we wanted to have a business that was going to be successful and scalable and had less issues out in the field, that we needed to take the R&D in hand, and we needed to be masters of our own destiny. And that was a big thing. A lot of it was, we did have issues with the product and our partners, but they weren't willing to change or adapt enough.
So software aggregation is using different packages?
Software integration.
Software integration.
It's using different packages to come up with the one solution.
Right. And you don't have any IP on it?
You don't have any IP, and basically what we were League of Nations, a supplier, rather than being one singular platform where your destiny was in your own hands. So I suppose in about 2006, in late 2005, early 2006, we were probably on 1.3 million turnover, and we did our first round of fundraising, and we went to the Irish VC market, and we pulled in €1.5 million at the time in 2006. That money was really earmarked, as I said, for R&D and also for our move across the pond to the UK market.
Right. And when you did outsource, was it like to India or?
No. At the time we outsourced our development, and we actually went to a Scottish software development house. Obviously, not one of the more economical regions for software development, but we knew the guys, and we felt that that we would definitely get product built to the specification that we were looking for. And again, we felt that we'd more control over where we were going with that, and it definitely worked for us at the time. And then in about 2009 we did, and even before that, about 2007, we started to take the software in-house because we wanted to have full control over our IP and stuff like this. And this would be something that investors would always have been harping on about that. But I suppose to get to the point, outsourcing initially was, because we managed it quite tightly, we got good bang for our buck.
Okay. How did the product develop from the initial?
Okay, I suppose from the initial up to about 2008, a lot of our technology was focused around vehicle technology for weighing bins, identifying bins, and also some software in the back end that was doing billing for municipal waste. But as I said there, probably outside of Ireland and Sweden, most countries do not use ERP software on the municipal, but they do very much so on the C&I. And so we felt at that time that that for further growth of the company, that we needed to evolve a little, move a little bit left, right of our sweet spot and get into the whole ERP space. And that was that really, I suppose, in fairness to my business partner Jimmy at the time, that was one of the things that he was the first to see, and he was the first to drive it on, and he got it spot on. And we initially started to build the software, but then we took a very, very bold step of acquiring a Scottish company that was doing a little bit less turnover than ourselves and had about 12 people, but were in that space. But they were in it for many, many years, and they had, they had a lot of value and a lot of industry knowledge brought up, and so that was, I suppose it accelerated our move into this space.
So acquisition was a
very good play, because we bought technology, we bought customers, and we brought knowledge to the table.
And I guess organic growth is pretty difficult in other countries, certainly.
It can be, look, you can't have all your growth through acquisition, but a mixture of the two definitely helps a company accelerate growth.
Okay. So with the motivation for people to use the technology, whereas people would imagine it's to do with the environment and all that, that's down the list. It's the whole fraud element was
that would be a number one. And also, I suppose, as I said, the industry would be traditionally not that tech strong, and definitely not that software strong. And so there was gaps. There was a big gap in the market for companies to come and implement technology that just tightened up their entire supply chain. And the whole industry has changed from, at one point, trucks just went out, drove routes as efficiently as they can, collected waste and delivered it to landfill, towards now they have to pick up 3 different fractions. The waste doesn't go to landfill, it goes to a material recycling facility, and there it's sorted into 3 different fractions, and then some of that material is sold on as secondary raw material to China and India, or else it's sold on as energy to big cities or whatever, or into the grid.
Could you give us some examples of the type of fraud you came across, say, in Ireland in the early days?
Yeah, I suppose now we're on camera, we have to be very, very careful. But Yeah. I'll never forget one time, actually. I can say it was in Cove. And so basically, there was one street where the truck went up at 7:30 in the morning and collected all the bins. And at 9:30 then again, all the bins were collected. And one of the guys from Cork said to me, look, there has to be a bug in the system. We'd expected 3 or 4 people to be maybe sharing the bins, but not 10. And we looked at it and we said, no, we had GPS technology as well, and we could see that they were on the main street and into the side street. And then, they set up a checkpoint 2 weeks later, and lo and behold, there was basically 10 people in unison sharing the bins on this street, pushed through the back door, filled, and out the other door. And, that was pretty typical at the time. One of our customers in the UK, on the commercial side, they had to have a bin amnesty, because basically guys had their own routes where they were going to their pub, picking their own bin, going down to their favourite restaurant, picking the bins there and getting paid all sorts. So, and I don't want to harp on too much about it, but, we did have customers where they lost 40% of their staff and rollout of the project. And that in itself was gave companies a return of investment of 4 months. And as I said, these were the kind of the USPs that we never would have envisaged from day one.
And you found that to be kind of universal across different countries?
Yeah, unfortunately I thought, maybe Paddy is very corrupt, but it's a universal phenomenon.
Okay. So how did the initial fact of having a co-founder work? You mean you knew each other? You were both from a technical background.
Both from technical background, and we brought different things to the party. Like Jimmy is incredibly driven, very strong, very strong technically, and he brought loads to the party. On myself, I was probably, even though I wouldn't have worked in sales prior to that, but that's probably where I gravitated to. And I suppose it's more so from the fact that in a startup and in running a business, you're going to have lots of good days and bad days, and if there's 2 involved, one guy can pick the other guy up when you're having the pretty rough day, and when you're getting the kicking from customers and things are not going your ways or losing contracts. So it's very, very good at that. And obviously the big thing is that you can bounce ideas off of. Right. That's without a doubt. Yeah. But it is always good to have someone there to pull you along the way when things aren't going as well. So.
And you're selling into 20 countries now? Globally?
Yeah, we have customers in about 20 countries. We have operations, we have offices in 9. So, and some of those countries have been through acquisitions we've done, but also where we've gone strategically. Our biggest market at the moment would be the US, followed by UK, then the Nordics, and then Ireland. So,
what about continental Europe?
Yeah, continental Europe has been it's been a little bit slower for us. We have done well in the Nordics, done well in the UK, which may be less continental Europe in another year, but it definitely is tougher to get in there. Yeah, it definitely is tougher to get in there. You've the language barriers. The French, or they often like to buy from French companies, and German's not too dissimilar,
Okay.
But that's something we're trying to crack. We have a few green shoots, and that's definitely where we feel that acquisition can help you into those markets.
The markets are a little bit more closed culturally for.
Yeah, and I suppose it's for patriotic reasons maybe, or just even in some markets, a lot of the recycling and waste industry might be run by the municipals, and you have quite a lot of tendering, and with tendering, that in itself is a fine art, and you need to have people in the ground that know when the tenders are up, that are in working with the municipalities that are trying to spec your product, and you're a little bit John the Baptist, trying to educate these people on where the industry is going and why they should be looking at products like this, and hopefully, if you're involved in influencing the specification, that you have a better chance of getting the right result.
I suppose because the cultures are similar, doing business in the UK probably wasn't that much of a transition from Ireland. But how was it starting in the US? How did you embark upon breaking into the market there initially? And have you any stories of challenges?
Yeah, we've lots of wounds from the US market. US market started very well. I got in contact with 1 or 2 companies over there, very, very interested in the technology and the concepts. And in the waste and recycling industry, they did look at Europe as being 5, maybe 10 years ahead of what they were doing. And they were keen to learn and keen to embrace with us. And in 2009, we raised funding again, and that really was earmarked towards cracking the US market. And at the time, it was a board decision, and we hired a US general manager, managing director, whatever, and we put him in situ, and I suppose to cut a long story short, it didn't work out. We weren't able to control him. I don't think he fully understood what we did as a business, what our customers wanted to see or do, and it nearly brought us under, and it was very, very, very tough. So he scaled the operation up way, way too quick. We ran up to over 15 people, and a couple of months later we had to go down and almost shut it down and bring it down to about 4 or 5 people with closer controls from Ireland. We then felt that we still hadn't lost faith in the market, even though we had a severe, severe nosebleed from it. And what we started to do was work with partners and go for a more gentle approach into the market. And we did that for 3 years, and our growth was slow and steady in the market, nothing over exceptional or that would get you excited about, but we were winning customers, winning reference sites. And then in 2013 we did an acquisition in the US of one of our largest customers whose US business probably would have been a factor of 5 bigger than our business there, and that just changed the whole dynamics for us as a business over there.
Fantastic.
So we went from having maybe 5-6 people on the ground working with a few partners to having an organisation with 50-60 people.
What part of the States was that, or was it throughout?
They would have had customers throughout. Their main HQ would have been out just outside Philadelphia, but they would have had people dotted across the
and I mean, it totally makes sense that acquisition helps and partners helps, but what about the idea of having people from your own business directly out there? I mean, did you need to go out there yourself and Jimmy? Did your senior people need to go out there? What's your view generally on setting up in a different country?
Like setting up in a different country, you have to make the business look and feel like the culture of that country, but there's no harm in sending someone from the mothership over there, if nothing else, just to sniff out what the opportunities are and to see how real they are. Like I would have gone to the UK initially when we set that business up. We didn't do it initially in the US, but we did send guys over there. And if nothing, it's just, I suppose, as I said, to sniff out how real the opportunity is there. But also, when you have an operation over there, I think it's absolutely vital that you've someone there that's feeding this back to HQ, and also that they're able to influence how things like development can be done a little quicker for markets over there, and that they just know how to pull the strings internally and make things happen. Like we've one of the best sales guys that I hired would have been our guy we had in Ireland, and we've moved him to Australia on a 2-year stint, and like that's proven very, very successful because he just knows the industry inside out and just knows the real pinch points for the customers and is able to direct things that way. And also he knows what strings to pull to get things done so as he doesn't let down his new customers.
Okay.
And so culturally, when you go to different places, these are always the challenge. Like if you go to Sweden, Sweden's a great place to do business. They're very, very honourable people, but to my shock, some of their waste collectors do pick bins that they shouldn't be. But in Sweden, if one of our guys on the ground is working with a customer, if there is an issue, they'll send an email and they'll never follow it up until things blow up, and they'll say, "But I sent you an email 6 weeks ago." And just to get those things culturally across, it does definitely help to have someone from the mothership, on top of things, and that they can spot the trouble before it happens.
So with acquisition, obviously the 2 reasons would be acquiring technology and land grab, but it must cause a lot of problems in terms of taking over companies, people issues, legacy tech. How have you dealt with that?
That's a continuous battle for us. I wouldn't say it's a struggle, but that's something that you have to continuously work on. You'll never migrate customers as quick as you'd like and doing that. But I suppose coming back to your question on integrating acquisition companies, when you start to scale a company, the big thing that you need to do at an early stage is to get ERP software involved so that you're able to manage all your operations seamlessly. And once you've that done, you can start to do that with the acquisitions. But it will be challenging because people have worked with different systems. You're bringing them to different systems. They get annoyed that maybe with R&D that they were able to go down to a developer just down the corridor and influence things there. Towards now, it has to go into a product-led design environment, a product management-led design environment, and that there's different processes and loops, and that can be tough for people. And not everybody lasts the pace when that happens. But yeah, look, acquisitions are always going to be tough. But as I said, it's a great way of winning customers, and often it can be great bolt-on technologies for our platform.
How have you found being an Irish company, say in the UK, in the US? Are you treated any differently? Are there advantages, disadvantages? Does it matter?
I don't think it overly matters, so long as people see that you have an operation on the ground in those countries and that you have a commitment. Because I said, in the waste sector, those two big markets that you've spoken about, they would always have viewed Ireland as being a little bit ahead of the posse, and that they were keen to learn and see what was happening there and stuff like that. But they like to do see that after a while it's just not an Irish-led organisation, that you've a local general manager, local support engineers and stuff like that, and that makes it, that definitely gives them a better feel for things.
And you've always kept your headquarters in Limerick, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
How have you found Limerick as a region for growing a startup? Because you were a startup 12 years ago.
Yeah. Limerick, it's been quite good. I suppose we find it that it's easier to retain talent in Limerick because there is obviously less competition. I know for any indigenous companies that when you turn on the radio on a Wednesday morning, you hear Mr. Bruton announcing 200 new jobs for Facebook. I know that's the companies in Dublin saying, "Oh no, we're going to lose a few people there. We're going to have wage inflation and stuff like that." So you have less of that in Limerick. It's starting to happen more, but you have less of that in Limerick. And some of the, as I said, some of the big job announcements are probably a little bit counterproductive for some of the indigenous tech firms, because good people are going to be poached.
So Dublin people wake up and hear Google and hire more people. Companies go, "Oh no, not again."
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that is the.
Well, Limerick is beginning to benefit from that.
It is, and and as I always make the point, I remember when I left Ericsson and the other thing was, after the boom, nobody in Ireland studied IT. And UL were turning out 200 graduates in 2000. It was down to about 25 2 years ago. And I used to always have the good story of when I used to work in Ericsson, there was about 400 people when I left, and they're now up to about 1,000 people. But at the time when I was there, we had an interfirms hurling team, because you had obviously enough of guys at that age profile to field the team. Now they don't have it, but there is a cricket team because there's a load of guys over from India.
Interesting. Right. So, in terms of your various rounds of investment, can you just talk us through those? Your first one was in 2006 for 1.6 million.
Yes.
That was EI. You were a HPSU company then, yeah?
We were a HPSU company then, and we got funding from two VC funds, the MENAC, which was a BES fund, NCB, and obviously Enterprise Ireland.
NCB is now Investec, is that right?
Yeah. Correct. So yeah,
did yourself and Jimmy manage that yourselves?
Yes, in 2006 we led that round ourselves. In 2009 was our second round, where we brought in a UK investment company, which was Web Ventures, and also Investec or NCB followed their money at the time, and that was a big round. That was about 5.75 million, and at that stage myself and Jimmy would have managed most of the rounds. After that, in about 2011, we took on a CFO, Leonard Kiley, who was absolutely huge addition to the company, and Leonard would have been very, very experienced guy, and he was a great guy to bring on board, and he really led the two big fundraisings that we did in 2014 and 2015. So I suppose that shows that as a company grows, as I said, as a company, the skill sets and the people that you have from a business as you grow it from 0 to 3 to 5 million, say, is significantly different from the skill sets of people that you have from 5 and beyond.
So the third was 24.6.
Yes.
And then the more recent one was 45 million.
Correct, yeah.
And what's been your experience with dealing with investors? I mean, you hear sometimes that investors bring a great network to the table or advice, or is it really just about the fund?
Yes, there's a mixture. A lot of it is, they obviously bring a lot of the money, obviously, and that's the big thing that they do. A lot of them will claim that they can bring lots of expertise and networks and that, but I don't fully agree with that, you know, and it's really that it has to be the executive team or the people that you have in your business. They have to be the guys that understand the industry and know that, and I don't think that I think the funds can bring a lot of experience when you go to exit or do different things like that, but in terms of industry knowledge, I don't think they bring as much to the table as they claim. That would be my view on it, but some people might say different, but that's from the experience that I would have had over the years.
Have you had bad experiences with investors? Have you had...
I suppose we've had investors where maybe not everybody was aligned to the same hymn sheet. That has definitely happened in the past, and you know, it is vital that you know that the investors and the other shareholders and the executive team are all singing off the one hymn sheet. That is absolute, because otherwise you can have a little bit of turmoil in the board and different things like that. But it is key, and it's key that, you know, when you go for investors, it's like any sale, but it's probably the biggest sale that you do, and the chemistry has to be right between both parties. That is the one thing I would say. And you know, if you have any doubts that these aren't the investor for you, it's, you know, I think you definitely have to sometimes go with your gut on that one.
Okay. Just come back to the UK. You briefly mentioned there on that their status in Europe may change. What's your view on the whole Britex thing? Like, is it going to be the end of the world if they leave, or are there positives? I
don't really have a view on the Pat. I don't know. I suppose, look, I actually don't think they will go, but if they do, I've no doubt that we'll manage. You know, there'll be opportunities, there'll be threats. You know, for us as a business, it doesn't really worry me, because we have a substantial, you know, we still get paid in sterling from our customers over there. They'll still want to use our software. We can, we'll still have staff that we'll be paying over there. Obviously, if the exchange rate deteriorates significantly, it makes you uncompetitive. So that's where I see, but it's, who knows?
What would you say your main challenges were looking back over the years, and what would you have possibly done differently?
Oh, there's lots you do differently. So you'll have lots of challenges, from everything from funding will always be a challenge, you know, for a startup, you know, and sometimes that can be good, because, you know, if you're a startup where, you know, you manage the money, you mind the money, every euro is a prisoner. Because, you know, I've seen some startups that get flooded with money, especially US ones, and my God, they just waste it, you know. So that'll always be, people is going to be the big one. Like as I alluded to there, hiring people in the IT space, it is a nightmare. And it must be even a bigger nightmare in Dublin, you know, when you've so much competition from multinational. And that has always been a big one, and I think it'll continue to be for a while. And you know, getting the right people and managing the people, they're always the challenges. I suppose as I said, you know, the big thing as you move from startup phase to aggressive growth phase, that some of the people that you had that were stars in the organisation early on, you have to be careful that you don't burden them with roles that they're not prepared for, because, you know, there's a good chance that they've never been in that position. Well, more than likely they've never been in that position before, and you can drown them. And we were guilty of doing that for people, and you wanted to do it for the right reasons, but you know, that's something that you have to be very, very careful. And I suppose as a small company, the one function that we would have ignored for a good while would have been the HR function. But you do that at your peril. Once you get to a certain size, you need to get someone in managing your HR, whether it's on a contract basis or that, because it can tie you up in knots. Like, I know when I came from a big company, my view on HR would be negative. They give you these stupid surveys, they send you for courses on lifting a box, but by God, when you're running a company and that, you realise, you know, you don't know whether there's a harassment case around the corner or whatever. And then as you integrate companies, that, you know, the cultural and, you know, people in different pension schemes and that, so they're kind of the things that you definitely have to, that I would have done better. I suppose the one thing that we would have done well, and you'd always say we should have been doing better, is that we were, from day one, we were good at getting sales, and we knew the value of having sales and the need for sales, and that is something that a lot of startups ignore. And it sounds absolutely common sense, but you'd be amazed the amount of startups that are putting sales on the long finger there. Yeah, the product has to be developed further, we have to do that, but I would say sales, get the product out as quick as you can. Now, it can't go out in absolute riddled with problems, but you know, it can go out with some issues because you need to get it out there and get your feedback from your customers, because your product guy, your software architects, they could have called a lot of the functionality wrong that will be called in by your customer. And you know, and the masters of that are Microsoft. They'll send it out, bugs and all, and it won't bother them, but they're right.
Yeah, and sometimes startups spend so much time polishing the products and sort of the geek kind of thing, it can miss perfection, miss the window. Yeah, it's a very good point. So what have been your highlights looking back now? What have you really enjoyed? What's been the best sort of buzz from the journey?
I suppose it would be working with the different people that you have in the organisation. And you know, a few people would have followed me from Ericsson's and stuff like that, and that would have been good. And different people that you bring on board. Obviously, at times winning different contracts would have been a big buzz for you at the time. And, you know, it's a good journey. Some days it can be a lonely journey, but in general, looking back at it, you know, I'd do it again, but it's, you know, it can be a bumpy enough road, but it's surrounding you with the right guys in the trenches and for different days.
So what's the next steps for AMCS?
Well, that's always the difficult one, and you know, that will be a movable feast. You know, so obviously growth is very big for the company over the next few years. We are surprisingly probably the biggest global player in our space, because there's a lot of fragmented players there, and we would hope that we can consolidate that and become significantly bigger. That we would hope that maybe we can drive the company to 100 million turnover in the next couple of years. That would obviously be the big one. Who knows after that? You know, our investors may drive us to IPO, they may drive us to trade sale, but you know, I think you let those things take care of themselves, and you know, the key focus is grow the business, make it happen, you know. And obviously we as a company, we need to, you know, what we're doing, yes, we have a very scalable company, but there's always things that we can improve on.
Excellent.
In terms of our delivery.
So just getting near the end of our time, would you have sort of 3 tips for budding startups from your experience? What would you advise?
Yeah, I've probably touched on them already, and my first one would be that, you know, for a startup, you know, you really have from an early stage to get out there and selling, and you have to realise the importance of that. Again, not to harp on about it, you'd be surprised how many people miss the boat in that. As I said, getting product out to customers, working with key strategic customers, partners, so as that you learn the industry. You know, you could have the biggest genius of software engineer working in the background, but he's never been on the back of a bin lorry. You know, he doesn't understand what happens, and you know, that's the key thing. And even from that point, I would say that, and it's probably even something we're probably not doing as good over the last few years as we've more employees. We used to always insist that everyone got in front of the customer, and so that they understood the customer pains and the reasons why the customer wrote a check to us every month. And that's very important. And they would be really the bits of advice I give to companies. And obviously, you know, that as you grow as a company, the shape of your organisation will change, and companies have to be willing, you know, you have to observe that, you have to be looking at change that. And sometimes it may be worth bringing in some outside help to help you shape the organisation.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Austin. I think it's been really insightful. I'm sure there's lots of questions out there. Who'd like to? Okay, it's an hour now, so we're very grateful for Austin's time.
Not at all.
Thanks very much. Very insightful. I think